Welcome to another episode of Facts. I'm your host, Stephen Boyce. We're doing an episode on the recent news of the death of Pope Francis. It has been worldwide. There are worldwide leaders that are assembling, even as I am doing this recording, to gather around the final moments of everyone's goodbyes to Pope Francis, who is being buried. He decided not to be buried over in St. Peter's Basilica with many of the other popes. He's actually been transported further down into Rome, where everybody is saying their farewells. And so this is the end of that time of Pope Francis. Now, I don't want to spend a lot of time talking about Pope Francis that much, other than a couple of things. Let's start with the positives. One, he did a great job of ecumenical engagement, keeping peace with the Eastern Orthodox Church, particularly in Constantinople, having made great friendships there. He did a good job of delegating things with the Anglican Communion, I think to a fault, but yet sought to reconcile and bring any kind of community that was possible that could be had between them. He worked with a lot of these inner so-called denominational groups in order to have some sort of correspondence of peace, which was one of the highlights of his time as a pope. At the same time, he was very good at working pastorally. Let's be real, unfortunately, through the papacy of Pope Benedict XVI, after really resigning as a result of a lot of interesting scandals, a lot of the things going on with sexual misconducts in the priesthood and things that were covered up. It was just an absolute mess where it seemed like it tainted some of the reputation of even Benedict XVI. And so it looked like the cardinals came together in the last conclave to bring together a more pastoral leader who is going to seek the best interest of individuals and so forth. And that is definitely one of the positives of Pope Francis. He did that very thing. He was very pastoral. Some of his greatest weaknesses that I didn't care for him about was he was doctrinally weak. He was very, very weak doctrinally. And even if you're not a Roman Catholic and you're not interested in Catholic doctrine, he was weak in really any kind of correspondence doctrinally across the Christian spectrum. And he was seemingly at times willing to downplay the doctrine in order to elevate the pastoral care to people. And listen, I'm not saying that we shouldn't have pastoral care. I'm not saying that people shouldn't be taken care of and we meet the needs of others and love, 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 which is the big message, and peace, 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 peace. But love and peace do find their end at truth too, because there's elements of truth that just don't allow for peace. There's certain groups that just cannot coexist with the Christian faith in peace. I was reading it just the other day in Matthew's gospel. Jesus said, don't think that I've come to bring peace, but a sword. And that there would be families turned against one another, in-laws against their children and their spouses, and siblings against each other. I mean, Jesus warned that this would happen because who he is and what he said was so controversial that it would create divided lines between people who follow his teachings and sayings and those who leave his teachings and sayings or reject his teachings and sayings. And so I would say one of the greatest weaknesses of Pope Francis was a part of one of his strengths. He was very pastoral, he was very outgoing, and he was very ecumenical. And in doing that, he sacrificed truth far too often in order to be pastoral to people that aren't going to become a part of the Catholic faith or even the Christian faith for that matter at all. I mean, he took this to the extent where they let a pagan idol into the Vatican and somebody stole it and threw it in the river, and then they retrieved it. But this gift was a pagan god. I mean, a goddess, excuse me. It was a form of idolatry. It had no place in Christian practice or even in the Christian place of worship. So these things became very interesting to me, I guess, as we correspond through the different areas of Pope Francis's life. But with that being said, he is now going to be replaced. A new pope will be selected by the cardinals in the next conclave. And that can't happen tomorrow. It takes time. In fact, it's usually between 2 to 3 weeks before they're able to assemble. They had to validate the death and things like that, which happened this week. And there was already meetings and ceremonies and prayers and services. These things have already happened. Today is the burial as I'm speaking. Now what's going to happen is a lot of correspondence. There's a lot of discussion that's going on, and then they will assemble. They have not really announced the permanent time of date and times and things like that as of this point, but it's usually between a 16 to 21 day span, somewhere in there, before they meet for conclave, and that'll happen. Now, there's a lot of people talking, Protestants, Catholics, Orthodox, doing videos very similar to this, asking the question, who will be the next pope? And there's some possibilities that I want to cover, and I'm not going to go as in depth as some people like Taylor Marshall or somebody like that. I just want to focus particularly on the group of men that are out there and talk about why this is so important for everybody that's listening to this podcast. It doesn't matter if you're Baptist, Anglican, Orthodox, Catholic, Lutheran. What happens in this next conclave will affect the Christian faith across the broad spectrum ecumenically. It's going to. It doesn't matter if you think it does or does not. It will. And so what we're going to have to pay attention to and even be praying for, yes, if you're a Protestant, you need to be praying for wisdom for the bishops and praying for the cardinals that are involved in this. Because when you see this conclave come to a conclusion and they say we have a pope, when the pope is announced, for the sake of the world and the Christian faith, we really need a godly man who is able to be both doctrinally sound, and even if you disagree with the Catholic doctrines, but just as it relates to the Christian faith and its practice and standard, but also pastoral. We need something that is the best of Pope Francis and the best of Pope Benedict XVI. And that person bring those two worlds of strong, sound theological understanding and practices with good liturgy and great reverence for the past and the history of the church, with somebody who's going to care for the needy and the poor and the outcasts, to bring those two worlds together and live in harmony rather than having to pick papacy, in the papacy, somebody who's one way or the other. We really would like to see a good correspondence of both. So as that may be, we're looking at the timeline here, and I'm going to pull it up on the screen, of a couple of possibilities that need to be examined. These are your front runners that people keep bringing up, leading cardinal candidates to be pope. There are some of these that are very strong and have really good voices universally, and there's some of these that are of great concern, to be honest with you. Cardinal Erdo is a favorite, particularly to those who are wanting to see a more conservative traditionalist in place rather than a modernist. He's in the country of Hungary. He's 72 years old. He was placed in by JP2. John Paul II was the one who appointed him. So he's kind of part of that old guard. He was a part of that old guard that was there post-Vatican II, along with Benedict XVI. I mean, he was in that group. So this would be a solid move. I don't know how well he'll be in. He's been in there a while. He's been in the conclave before. He's been a part of this. Again, he's worked with 3 popes now. John Paul II. He's worked with Benedict XVI. He's worked with Pope Francis. So he's seasoned. He's very thorough. He's not going to be a wavering person who goes back and forth. He's very devout in what he believes. And if you scroll down to the bottom here on this page, and I'll have this link available for you to look over since we're not going to spend a ton of time here. There's kind of like, well, where does he stand on certain issues? Like, what's his position on certain things in the Catholic Church? Some of the main ones are left in question here. This one, to me, I don't think is a question mark. Ordaining female deacons. Well, first of all, I don't think this will ever happen. If it didn't happen with Francis, I don't see it happening at all. And it shouldn't, for that matter. I understand that there were female deacons or diaconates back in the early church, but their function was very, very different than what is being called a deacon today, where this has been overly abused and trained into our minds to be some sort of nuance to clergy that the Anglicans have completely abused. So that shouldn't even be in a discussion at all. But he certainly would not be in favor from what I've read about him. Blessing same-sex couples is a no. I mean, there's no doubt in my mind about his position on this. There's a lot of questions about making priestly celibacy optional. That's another big discussion, because now you have the pastoral provision, which allowed people on the outside of the Catholic Church who come back into communion with them to still remain married. This is where the Anglican Ordinariate has come in. They've done this with Lutherans, especially in Europe, where people can come in and actually be married. And there are married priests in the Catholic Church now that have come in from the outside. The question is about whether or not that should be standard, or should they all stay celibate. There's a lot of back and forth, a lot of debate about that as well. Restricting the old Latin Mass. Now, this is something that is ordo is an important thing to a lot of traditional Catholics. The traditional Latin Mass is very, very old. I think that it should be allowed. I think it should be fully functional. I do think that there needs to be a lot of work in some of the Mass that's going on post-Vatican II, but there's no reason for the old traditional Latin Mass to be removed or done away with. This is one of the biggest things that got Pope Francis on the bad seat of a lot of traditionalists. A lot of traditionalists go into this, and Francis tried to reconstruct and do away with these kinds of practices. And that all that did is create havoc and division that was completely unnecessary, if you ask my opinion. So he would not restrict it. It says it's ambiguous, but it's pretty clear based on his permissing and things like that he would not be against this possibility of people continuing to practice the traditional Latin Mass. On the other hand, we have Cardinal Zuppi, who has been mentioned a few times now. I think Zuppi is a very middle-of-the-line moderate. I don't know how to say that any nicer. I mean, he's not bad. I don't think he would do a bad job. He's Italian. He was placed by Francis not too long ago, about 6 years ago. He does a good job in some things. And again, there's a lot of controversy about him because he would kind of be a boring pick. And I don't mean that to be, rude or even to be critical. He's not going to do much. It's going to be a very quiet papacy if he's involved, in my opinion, from what I've discovered and studied on him. He is against ordaining female deacons, but he is not against the blessing of same-sex couples. And this, to me, is concerning right here. Cardinal Zuppi firmly defended Pope Francis's Fiducia Supplicans, which, again, was majorly criticized by a lot of conservatives because of its ambiguity. And I've had Eric Ybarra on this program talking about that. Feel free to go back and look at it. We did a whole entire episode in relation to this. But Fiducia Supplicans, and Francis even confirmed on 60 Minutes when being interviewed that he did not do this for the purpose of blessing the union of the same-sex couples, but rather the blessing of the people, the persons. And this gets complex, and we talked about that. And again, that's not the point of this episode. Please go back and listen to my interview with Eric Ybarra. We went through this in depth. I was also on Michael's channel, Reason and Theology. We talked about different aspects and how this was negative for the Catholic Church, not positive. So he defended it, saying the document showed the loving gaze of the church for all of God's children without undermining the teaching of the magisterium, which I don't agree with. I think that it undermines a lot. And I do not think that everybody is God's children. That idea is we're all image bearers. I agree with that. But to say that we're all God's children it's faulty. I mean, we see even scriptural teaching. 1 John says that there are children of God and there are children of the devil. And you're either one or the other, and there's no in between. So not everybody's children of God. And that's true of heterosexual, not just homosexual marriages as well. But Zuppi allowed for a church blessing of homosexual couples in his archdiocese. To me, this makes him kind of concerning in that regard. He's also in favor of making priestly celibacy optional. Again, Cardinal Zuppi does not exclude the possibility of making priestly celibacy, saying its topic being discussed. He has recalled that in the Catholic Church, there are already married priests. As I made statement, that a lot of that happened from the pastoral provisions that happened not too long ago in the recent past. He said, if you go to Ukraine or Romania, the priests by the Byzantine Rite communities, and again, I guess I should add the Byzantine Rite in here too. Now you're seeing it in these locations as well. They're in full communion with Rome. So you got the Byzantine, you got the Anglican Ordinariate, you got Lutheran options coming into the play here. And he says, but linked to Rome are already there. He said, so it is a discipline that can be changed. And I agree, because realistically, we see in the beginning of the early stages of the church, there were both celibate and married priests. And I think they're both good. I don't think that it should be one or the other. I think the practice of both is healthy. We know St. Peter was married. So I think that would be a good discussion in his favor that actually might be appealing. Now, his restriction on the Old Latin Mass would be interesting here, because he has shown sympathy for the Old Mass and has celebrated it on occasion. So that might make people feel okay about him on that. But asked if he thought the traditional Mass was a problem, he said, no, I think it was a directive that the Pope thought was useful, and it was applied to great awareness and with great responsibility. And so there's different arguments as it relates to that. And there's other issues on here too, like climate change. Like, he's all for that. So he's going to be more liberal there. Communion for divorced and remarried, he's in favor of it. This one is an interesting one too, because if people are in a invalid marriage, should they be taking of the body and blood of Christ at the altar? And the answer is no, if they're in invalid marriages. Now, if they've received proper annulity, and that the church has observed their former marriages and said these were never valid sacramental marriages to begin with, they can receive the issuing of annulity, which allows them to now convalidate the marriage that they're currently in, showing true validity and sacramental value. And in doing that, then they would be able to partake. And Pope Francis has done a great job in this. I mean, in the sense of like speeding up the process of people receiving a bill of nullities, because it took a lot of money and a lot of time to get from the diocese and the Vatican itself people to have their marriages that did not work and failed and ended in divorce to be evaluated by the church to ask this question: were they ever valid to begin with? Did the people come into this with the right motive, right? In honesty and integrity and sacramentized? And sometimes they're not. In fact, a lot of Protestant marriages and a lot of civil marriages that are happening in the world today, by the standard of the Catholic Church, are not valid sacramental marriages. And so Francis has allowed it to be a much cheaper process. It was thousands of dollars in order to have the marriages investigated, and if found any kind of invalidity, they were given an opportunity now to go out and change and have a different identity to that marriage, and then have their current marriage or future marriage validated and given a proper sacramentizing of the marriage, which allows them to take full communion with the See of Peter and to benefit from its sacraments. And so there needs to be caution around this. And one of the concerning things for me here, and this is, I'm speaking as somebody who is previously in the past divorced on a wife leaving and things like that, having received a nullity in the Anglican communion and having experienced that, and also continuing to look into that even from Rome's perspective. Here's one of the things that I've come to realize: it's good that marriages get evaluated and found either valid or invalid by the church. And if they're invalid, they need to be seen as what they were never. They were civil, but not sacramental. And then these current marriages need to be convalidated and put into the sacramental effect, and allow the Lord to bless that marriage in grace and sacrament, which allows the ability for the home to be properly and functionally involved in the sacraments of the church and to experience the full grace that it comes from. And so if we're going to distort that by allowing just anybody without investigating validity of marriage to just partake of sacrament, we could be doing harm to the person while so-called helping them. And it's damaging. And it's taking of the body and blood unworthily as far as the Eucharist goes. So to me, that one would be concerning. Now, I'm not going to go through all of these on here for the sake of time today, but I am going to investigate some of these that I think are the most important. And one of the ones that I want to bring up here too, as we relate to these different bishops. And one of the things that I saw was Robert Sarah. Cardinal Sarah is a really good conservative theologian. I mean, if you're talking about somebody who you would like to see similar to the positions of Benedict the 16th, I mean, he's the guy. In fact, he was appointed by Benedict the 16th in November of 2010, and he's a strong advocate of the traditional values of the Catholic Church. He's not very moderate in places at all. But one of the things that he struggled with was administration. Now, again, if he is selected by the cardinals to be the next pope, it would be fascinating to see who is put in place with him to kind of help regulate and really to oversee the affairs of administration, because he really didn't do a good job. And so he's strong spiritually, he's strong doctrinally, very weak administratively. I would not be sad if he is elected the next pope. I would be shocked, to be honest with you. I think he's probably too conservative to rally a 2/3 vote, especially when many of the appointees that are in the cardinals are there by Pope Francis. And I'll kind of give my idea who I think is realistic in the end, but I struggle to see where Cardinal Robert Sarah would be elected by a 2/3 majority. And if he is, great. And we'll pray the Lord gives great administrators to come alongside him and help. He's against ordaining female deacons, same-sex couples. Again, this is the conservative side. He's against the celibacy option. And again, I understand that's a conservative traditional value of the Catholics. But I actually would personally, as I stated, oppose this position. I think it should be in special circumstances permitted. Especially men who were already married younger in life and then were called to ministry later, or they felt the call, or they were running from God, or they weren't living in light of those things. And the Lord, changed their hearts in their late 20s, early 30s, but they may have been married for 5 or 6 years. They may have already had a child or two. I think that these things need to be discussed. I don't think they should be super loose with it either. I don't think it's just, every man for himself thing. I don't think that should be the case, because there is a benefit to the celibacy side of the priesthood where they are not attached. As Paul talked about, he wished that all men were like him. He didn't have to deal with the attachments. He didn't have to deal with the struggle and the problems of family. But I also think that the Bible teaches that the husband of one wife and his children in Titus and in Timothy indicate that there were leaders in the church who did have married lives. Peter was married. Many of the other apostles were married. And Paul even said, do I not have the right to do so as an apostle? And the answer is yes, he did. He chose not to, but he had the right to do so. And I think that right, that opportunity should be discussed further. But again, I won't be sad if he's in restricting the Vetus Ordo. He is not for restricting at all. He thinks it should be allowed. He even said here in a statement that unfettered celebration of the traditional Latin Mass has manifestly brought forth good fruits. And this is where a lot of the traditionalists are happy with him. The promoting of synodal church, he's against it. One of the 5 cardinals who on August 21st, 2023, sent a 5 questions of dubia to Pope Francis to express their concerns and seek clarification on points of doctrine and discipline ahead of the opening of the Synod of Synodality, which, we don't have time to get into that in this episode. My goodness. In the Vatican in October 2023. He has been critical of the inclusion of all the synodal dialogue in the name of the sensus fidelium. Just because someone identifies as Catholic does not mean they are part of the sensus fidelium. To be Catholic is more than a cultural identification. It is a profession of faith. And I couldn't agree more. And we wouldn't be surprised to see here. Climate change, he doesn't really care about that. Reassessing different things, communion of divorce, remarried, he would say no. So there are a lot of conservative values here for him, which is why a lot of people like him. Another one over here that I honestly, this choice would be a concern. This would be a concern, I think, for a lot of people. Tagle is a Filipino. He was appointed by Benedict honestly, I'm shocked that he turned out the way he did, being an appointee of Benedict in November of 2012. He's been on here for a while, and he served under different circumstances and issues that came about. But I don't know. There's just some concerns here, not necessarily on some of his positions, and I'm gonna leave it at that. I don't want to go too in depth with him. Here's a whole section if you want to read on it. How he evaluated certain situations, crisis like the coronavirus, his view with the issue of Islam, his views here. I'm going to have this link available for you. Priestly celibacy, which we talked about, women diaconate, homosexual priest. So there's a lot of things that are here where he does play a lot of middle ground, to me, more than he really should. And so there's a whole section here. You can read about him, his involvement in different places, but his overall positions could be summarized here. Ordaining female deacons, he's against it. Blessing same-sex couples, it's kind of ambiguous, but he seems to be in favor. The celibacy side, not as big of a deal. But again, there's other places. Yes, he wants to focus on climate change. The issue of the divorce remarried is uncertain. He is a middle of the liner, which makes him, again, a viable candidate. I don't care for him. I don't foresee him getting it, but because he's middle of the line, it wouldn't surprise me. Now, there's others in here too. Cardinal Parolin, or Parolin, however you want to pronounce it. He's in Italy. Francis appointed him in 14. This would be, I don't even know how to begin to say this would be a disaster. Oh boy, this would be a disaster. So he is Francis 2.0. And I really, really would hate to see this individual. Again, if he's the Bishop of Rome, he's the Bishop of Rome. I'm hoping that he's too far to the left for 2/3 to want to vote for another Francis figure. As many positive things as Francis did for the Catholic Church, I think the cardinals are smart enough to know that it created a lot of unnecessary division in the church for the sake of doing things outside of the church. And I think if the cardinals are smart and they know their diocese and their bishops and their priests, they know that something cannot go on the way it's been going, that it is going to be to the greater detriment of the church as a whole. So I would love to believe the cardinals are smart enough not to do another Francis experiment, because it'll lead us to a greater downfall and a greater division within the church. Need somebody strong that can get in and do the job. Restricting the Latin Mass, that will create, oh my goodness, the amount of division that would create. It would be unnecessary. Blessing same-sex couples, it says ambiguous. It's really not. He's where Francis was. Again, I don't think it's that ambiguous. Shockingly, he's not for the ordaining of female deacons, but there are other issues in here as well. Communion for the divorced remarried naturally takes Francis's position here. Again, I think problematic. He's probably one of my favorite. One that I don't know why is just constantly in my mind as a viable candidate that could do a lot of good for the Catholic Church for a long time. A couple of reasons. One, his greatest weakness is probably the best thing about him. His weakness is he's young. He's 60 years old. He's from Italy, but he is a Latin delegate in Jerusalem. So he's been involved quite a bit with the crisis there, with Gaza and Israel and the Palestinians and all the things that have gone down over the last year and a half. It's been a mess. He has done a tremendous job of trying to keep peace and value humanity on both sides by also protecting and being careful of those that are children and women who are innocent, who are targeted. I mean, he's been very, very vocal and very, very involved in this in a very fair way, not really picking one side or the other, but looking at the church, having Christians in both parts of the world, in both parts of these countries, in both parts of these groups. And he has worked hard to offer himself as a hostage in place of hostages. I mean, what an amazing opportunity for him to show the great love of God there, where he has offered, like, release these hostages and take me in their place, especially the children. And so he has done a tremendous job. Now, he was appointed by Francis, and that's a big reason is the work he's done to keep peace in the Holy Land. I think he would be a great option for a couple of reasons. Number one, I think that he's balanced. He's got the strong doctrine and that Pope Benedict XVI mindset of how to think in a theological world, while also being very practical and pastoral to put that doctrine into proper practice. I think when I said earlier, we're looking for a pope and we're praying for a pope that has the best of Francis and the best of Benedict, but drops the worst of Benedict and the worst of Francis. Of one of the guys that I think is the most is this bishop right here, this cardinal, Pier Battista Pizzaballa. And to those that are not able to see the visual, you're going, is that real? Yeah, it's a real name. He is what a name. I mean, if anybody wondered if he was Italian, you didn't have to wonder anymore. That clears that up. But he is probably my favorite candidate for Pope that has emerged on the scene, who I think can bring the best of both worlds. Now, again, he's 60. That's very young for a Pope. But that means that if his health permits, you could see the next papacy lasts anywhere from 20 to 30 years, depending on how well his health holds up. Maybe even longer if it goes better with his health. He could be a tremendous work of ministry for the work of the papal authority as the See of Peter. And I think he'd be fair. And really what Rome needs is some peace in that area where he was, and he has these relationships built, and he's worked with these different bishops across the Orthodox side into the Catholic side. He's working with people in these different areas that are hostile. What Rome could use is a guy like that who's able to have these international and these ecumenical discussions again and find a way to be blunt, but also bring peace while trying to also hold to the truth. And I think that he is one of the best candidates that could do that. Here's how he stands on things: ordaining female deacons, he's against. Blessing same couples, it says it's unknown. There's no show of evidence in support of this. I'd be overly shocked if he was for it. He's never really spoken about the priesthood and celibacy. I don't think it's that important to him. I can see him just by reading some things about him that he would be open to dialogue, and that if he had the support of other cardinals to start letting certain things happen beyond the ordinary, beyond the Byzantine rite and things like that. I think if we started seeing some of that fluctuate better, I think he could be open to it. I don't think he's going to be like strict on this or strict on that. Very middle of the line, but I think he'd be reasonable and have an open mind to it. Restricting the Latin Mass, he's permitted the Latin Mass, even in Jerusalem. So he would not restrict it. He's actually in favor of it. And he has no problem with the celebration of the traditional Mass. And he says that the rather moot as a cardinal immersed in the great diversity of rites within the Catholic Church, Latin, Byzantine, Syrian, Armenian. I mean, his point is we should let these traditions happen. And now you have the Anglican in there with the Ordinariate. There's other issues here that people are like climate change. Again, he's not here and he's not there. He's not left. He's not right. He's not left. He's not right. He's not all over the place. He's just kind of like down the middle of the line. Like, let's talk about it. Let's negotiate. Let's see what's important to us. Same thing with promoting synodal church. Like what is the best things that we can do here to help without compromising who we are, our identity. That's his view. That's his prerogative. That's his point. And I think it's fair. I think he holds, again, middle of the line. Now, the German synodal way, he has not spokenly public about the German synodal way, but he is opposed to some of its key elements and should be. And he should be. The divorce side of things, where they could take communion, there's really nothing there. Again, I can see him as a reasonable man. So what you see about Cardinal Pizzaballa is that he's the Latin Patriarch of Jerusalem. He's a very balanced guy. He's reasonable. He's level-headed. He's not all the way to the right. He's not all the way to the left. This is why I think he has a really good chance. I think he has a good chance because I think what's going to happen in this election is that you're going to see people that want to swing left and have a more liberal or moderate progressive kind of person. Then you've got the people that want the really high traditionalists. This is why I don't think some of these guys will get elected this year. I don't think Bishop Sarah will get elected because it's too far over here. And then you don't want Francis 2.0, which ends up happening with some of these individuals like Parolin or even maybe Zuppi in some ways. I think that there's going to be a need to be careful not to go into a full-fledged left or full-fledged right. And what typically happens is when they're trying to swing through this pendulum, they usually land somewhere balanced and in the middle. And if there was a guy that is in the middle, who's reasonable, who likes negotiation, who's self-sacrificing to his own ideas and comforts in order to help, it's Pizzaballa. Pierre Battista Pizzaballa is a very middle of the line, which is more on the conservative side of that line. And if there is a best case scenario, for the conservative, more traditionalist Catholics who are able to see the maintaining of traditional practices with also the protection of those that have been post-Vatican II, I don't know if there's a better candidate than Pizzaballa and Erdo, possibly Erdo. These two would be, I mean, you're basically getting a John Paul II kind of guy in both of these people. You're basically getting that kind of guy. Maybe with a little bit of a Benedict XVI more so on Erdo, but the spirit of pastoral provision and the spirit of being more pastoral in nature, you'll get more of that from Pizzaballa. So honestly, if we landed as a Christian community, and again, I know people get really upset, like, but I'm not Catholic, it doesn't really matter. Okay. It does matter. It does affect you whether you want it to or not. We, as a Christian community in the world, with our brothers and sisters in the Orthodox, the Catholic, or the Lutheran, or the Presbyterian, or the Anglican, whatever you are, that world of Christianity is influenced and affected by who is sitting in the chair of Peter. I don't care who you are. I'll say it again. I've said it at the beginning, and I'll say it again. It affects all Christian beliefs. It affects all Christian communities. And therefore, we, as a Christian community, should be praying about this. And if the Christian world has somebody in Rome for the next 20 to 30 plus years, like a Cardinal Pizzaballa, he would do a great service to the Christian faith universally, as would somebody like Cardinal Peter Erdo, who would do a great job. I think Robert Serra would do. I think he needs some help on the administrative side. I think we're slightly in trouble if somebody like Parolin or Tagle end up in there. There are a couple of others here that should be considered as well. I'm not a big fan of some of these guys down here. I don't think they have a chance. I really think it's going to come down this top row right here, these top 8 men, from Erdo to Zuppi to Serra to Tagle, Ranjith, maybe not so much him, but you know, there's always a shockwave that hits people that they didn't expect. Parolin, Pizzaballa, these are going to be the main primary people that are already being talked about, who are probably being pushed, who are probably being talked to and doing the different rounds of talking and discussions and meetings and trying to vouch for people to think differently and vote ways that they probably wouldn't. I think the discussion is happening right here in this group. I mean, there's many other as well. I mean, there's 22 leading candidates and here's your 12 major, but I really think these top 2 lines are going to be your major guys. It could go a lot of different ways. I'm not exactly sure who we'll see in the end. The old saying is whoever goes into the conclave of Pope comes out a cardinal. Because if you're already going into this thinking you're going to be the Pope, you're probably not. But I really think this is an important conclave. I think it's a very important conclave for all of Christendom. And I think all of us need to be praying that God would do something through the cardinals. He would give wisdom and insight and perspective that they would see the beauty of unity and faith and peace and harmony and truth, all of those characteristics brought together under the same banner. Not one or the other, or not a little this and a lot of that. And I'm praying that we will see God's best, where we see a pope who's going to be like a Pope Gregory the Great, who unites the churches under truth, who is pastoral and humble, but also strong in conviction and strong in their faith. I would love to see the next pope do a lot of good for the world and Christendom across the board for many years to come. And we're talking about him, and our great-great-great-grandchildren are talking about him. That's my prayer. My prayer is that we would see that. If I had a favorite, if you would, my opinion means nothing, but I would love to see Pizzaballa or Erdo or Sarah in my top three there. The top three I would not like to see, two of which we just went over. I do not want to see some of these others like Tagle. I mean, I think that would be, that would be interesting. And I'd rather not have to deal with the interesting. It'd be nice just to see a good, strong candidate come into this. Well, that link is for you to look over. It is in the description. Make sure you click it and read through some of the different things there. Be in prayer. As always, we appreciate you following us. We're growing daily. Every time I look at the podcast side on our 7 platforms, plus our YouTube, new followers join us every single day and send lots of good feedback and lots of good comments. And we're seeing good things happen there. Be in prayer for the rest of this year. There's a lot of good discussions coming up. I'm going to be involved in very important, key, really academic discussions about Ignatius of Antioch. My article is in the second stage of editing. Send it over to a couple of guys who do a lot of published peer review work, who are making it peer review like, so that way it is able to be submitted to journals. It'll also be publicly available. I'll have it on my Academia EDU. I just updated my profile a little bit on there today. It'll be available on there soon. It's in the second stage. I'm going to do 3 stages of edit on it, and then it'll be released for all of you. But in the meantime, I'm going to be doing some different discussions and even going on different programs to talk about some of these things with different people. Jack Bull and I are doing back-to-back Saturdays, I believe, on 2 different programs, a Christian program that's Catholic and an atheist program. So I don't know how we got invited together on these things, but it happened. But we're looking forward to that. That's coming up. Keep your eyes and ears open for new episodes as they release. And if you want to be a partner with us and support us financially, even a one-time gift or even just $5 a month or something like that, we are 501c3. We do have a board of trustees that monitor everything we do. And we're using a lot of that for updates, materials, travel. I just spoke at a conference in Hilton Head a couple weeks ago. Got another place we're going to be speaking at soon. So we're really, really excited about the opportunity to continue to grow and share the truth and teach the history of the church and teach the history of Scripture to different churches. And if you're somebody that listens to this and you ever want somebody to come teach or share, look, we're opening our schedule up to do more of that in the summertime as we get closer to summer. It's hard to do that in the semester being an adjunct professor and a teacher teaching apologetics and Christian worldview. It's hard to do that. But as summer comes along, our schedule opens up a little bit, especially around the weekends, where we can do more of that traveling. So always feel free to reach out to us there. And as always, grace and peace to you. God bless.